Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We have lots of sustainable development goals to get through this afternoon, so we'll kick it off. Hope you enjoyed your lunch. Today, we're absolutely delighted to welcome three leaders from different fields and continents to discuss a very timely and important subject, the Sustainable Development Goals. And you'll see on our screens we have the symbols of all of the Sustainable Development Goals mentioned up there. Before we go much further, though, I'd like to say a big, warm thank you to our sponsors. We have a great table here from Abbott. Thank you. Unfortunately, Kathy Pickus couldn't be here, but they've been longtime sponsors of our work. We have a lead sponsor for the series, Horizon Pharma. We're delighted to welcome them this year. Abbott and USG are supporting sponsors, and then our patron sponsors. We also hear Ashley McCall, whose birthday it is today, so happy birthday to her, and thank you for your support. And Avery McCall, the Holt House Trust, which our colleague Brian Hansen, who is our VP for Studies, who's very interested in the subject matter, is a part of, and the Frankel Family Foundation. Many of you might know Mimi Frankel, so thanks to all of you. A big round of applause. And it's this kind of support makes our audience so fascinating with wonderful students. Welcome. We're so delighted you're here and getting engaged in the dialogue early. So thank you for coming to the students. And then finally, thank you to Vital Voices for the partnership. I just enjoyed a really lovely lunch, and we're delighted to have you here. So as many of you know, the UN is currently gathering. Everyone is in New York right now. The west side of Manhattan, or the east side of Manhattan is a bit of a mess. I don't know if anyone, have many of you been to the UN week before in New York? Arms up? Yes, it's the only time I've ever had Bishop Tutu in front of me in the queue for security and Tom Friedman behind me. So I recommend it highly if you ever get a chance to go there. And you know the Sustainable Development Goals were announced in 2015 as a follow-on to the Millennium Development Goals, and that's what we're going to discuss here today. And let me just tell you who we have on our panel. Sitting right next to me is Rosanna Shak. She's from Liberia. She's a trained nurse. She's worked with former girl soldiers and war wives in Liberia, and her NGO is called Think. Then next to her, from Argentina, a two-time member of Parliament in Argentina, we have Laura Alonso. She serves as the executive director of Poder Ciudadano?
Ciudadano, I was, yeah.
Ciudadano, yes, before that. And she's a member of the Vital Voices Global Leadership Network and a young global leader for the World Economic Forum. And then lastly, we have Elise Nelson. She serves on Secretary Clinton's Advisor Committee on Strategic Dialogue and previously served as the deputy director of the Vital Voices Global Democracy Initiative at the State Department. So thank you, you're all very welcome. So I think we'll just go back in history a little bit to kick it off with Elise. 20 years since the Beijing conference where the famous statement was uttered, humans' rights are women's rights and women's rights are human rights. So you were there, I understand, in 1995. You were a child, I'm sure, when you
12.
were there. Yeah, exactly. Can you tell us what you think has been achieved? It's been 21 years. Love to hear your reflections from then and now.
Yeah. So I would say one of the greatest things that's been achieved is awareness. You know, people, I don't think 20 years ago that many people would be gathered here at lunch to talk about international women's leadership. The other thing that's been achieved is data. Now have proof. In the very early days when I was working for Hillary Clinton and Madeleine Albright on integrating what happened in Beijing into US government at the State Department and at the White House, we would talk about how, well, you know, the only way to move forward is if you don't leave half the population, girls and women, behind. You hear that a lot now. We had no proof back then. We thought, well, we would just keep putting it in speeches and people will believe it. And we knew it had to be true, I mean, anecdotally, right? But there was no proof. And now we have data, not enough, that shows that, you know, investing in girls' education, you know, improves the lives of their families and communities. Investing in women's economic empowerment, you know, raises economies around the world. Stopping violence against women actually is also an economic issue in addition to a human rights issue. So I think we've seen great strides forward. I'd say, in my view, the one area we are really, really lacking is violence against women. It is still the only issue that crosses every single border around the world. No woman can say she's free from it. No culture can say they're free from it. It affects all of us, whether it be domestic violence or human trafficking, rape as a weapon of war, as you've heard in many places around the world. And, you know, honestly, my fear is it's getting worse because it's seen as a powerful tactic.
Right.
And, you know, we're now living in a world where people know that violence against women is wrong, but yet 800 million women and girls around the world live in countries where domestic violence is not a crime. Even in this country, the issue of domestic violence is costing us $8 billion a year. Sometimes you got to put things in money context to see what a huge issue it is. So I'd say by and large we've moved forward, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
Awareness is there, which is great, but now that we've got the megaphone, as I often think of, people are listening, it's really time to move forward. And that's what remains to happen, I think, in the next 20 years, or hopefully it won't take 20 years.
Great, thanks. And Laura, could you speak to us a bit about the women's movement in Latin America?
Well, yes, Latin America are many Latin Americas. So it's quite difficult to talk about a very diverse region. It's a very rich region, but very unequal as well, also culturally. So I could not speak, it's not fair to speak about one Latin America and to speak about, to have only one general view. I can speak about Argentina and maybe other countries, but Latin American societies have become very violent because of drug trafficking and because of other organized crime mafias that are operating there. So I think that women are also victims of that kind of violence. We are living in more insecure societies. In some places it's horrible, horrendous. Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, in Central America, the situation is completely different to the situation, for example, in Argentina or in Chile or Uruguay, where you have different type of violence, but it also depends on the, in which socioeconomic sector you are developing your own life. However, for example, in the case of Argentina, Argentina has a strong women movement, very strong, and it's quite old. It's a country that has had women presidents, women ministers, members of the Supreme Court. We have a quota law, so 1/3 of Congress is women. And now Congress is discussing parity for women. This is something I haven't told you, which is quite interesting. However, we still lack of more women in private sector corporate boards are male-dominated. However, there is a long way to go, and we are doing efforts to include women economically and to address domestic violence, but also other ways of violence. So we talk a lot about violences against women. It's not only one type of violence. You can have economic or patrimonial violence, psychological, cultural, physical, of course. And Congress in the past year has regulated in Argentina femicide, for example. So when a woman is killed because of her condition, the conviction is higher, and it has been applied. And 2 years ago, or less than 2 years ago, there was a femicide, and one journalist tweeted, what are we going to do? Are we going to do something, or are we going to sit and wait till they kill us? And this created a massive Twitter movement that went onto the streets. So we had this massive protest of more than 1 million people outside on the streets protesting against violence, which was very interesting. And the government has been reacting to this, sometimes with more or less efficiency. However, the issue is up there.
Yeah, we did a program a few years back about women's land owning rights in Mexico, which were appallingly bad. I don't know if they've improved. Do you have that issue at all in Argentina?
Well, no, we don't have that,
yeah.
type of.
Because as you say, it's not just one Latin America.
Yes, because also in Mexico you have a huge population, indigenous population in many parts of Mexico. They don't even speak Spanish. So yes, that's why I talked about many Latin Americans, because I think that's a fair way to put it.
Sure. So we move on to the African continent, to Liberia, which actually you have an impressive record of being the country that put the first female head of state, right, with Ellen Sirleaf Johnson. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Liberia addressing the global women's movement?
Well, Liberia has been a part of the women's movement from before Beijing. And then as a result of the Beijing Conference on Women, we had a ministry created called the Ministry of Gender and Development. And of late, that ministry has now become the Ministry of Gender, Children, and Social Protection. The Ministry of Gender has been very instrumental in supporting grassroots women's organizations. And as Elise said, awareness raising has been one of the key issues. For us to get a female president in Africa was not easy, and it is still not easy for her. Women leadership has been considered as a fight against men. Now, when you live in a male-dominated world, and then you start talking about females being equals, or females should have leadership, roles set aside, unless there is legislation, which we have started to engage in, things are blamed on that female leader. Global recession is her fault. When there are no jobs, it's her fault. When the dad cannot bring home food, money, it is her fault. When she got in power in 2005, we had general elections. It took all of our efforts and lobbying with the males, lobbying with our boys, and lobbying with everybody we knew. We want a lady to win. And she did win. She did appointments into the cabinet of women. Paramount chiefs, town chiefs, local authority, women appointments were made. But when her second term came around, we saw the numbers of women in leadership dropping. Now, what was the cause of that? We looked at our parliament. We have 15, subdivisions of our country. So each subdivision has 2 senators, and the representatives depend on the sizes of districts. So we have 73 seats in the representatives. Right now, we only have 9 women in the representatives and 4 women in the Senate. What went wrong? 2014, we had special senatorial elections, and as activists and advocates, we went out, even including myself, we went and we signed up to be candidates for senator. Well, then along came Ebola, which restricted movement. We could not have rallies, and so it went bad. Out of the 20 women candidates, only 1 went back, and it's because she was a sitting senator already. And because of her performance in her area of the country, the women made sure that she stayed, and even were able to get men to make her stay. And so now, next year, we're having elections again. And we're out there, women, let's go in numbers. And so right now, at our parliament, the senators have passed the affirmative action bill, and it's been sent to the House of Representatives, so that there's at least 30% female representation in the legislature. And so again, we're going to try so that in what we call the affirmative action, 22 seats have been set aside for the marginalized segments of our society. So from the 73 seats, 22 have to be put aside, 16 for women, 3 for disabled, and 3 for youth. Liberia has a huge youthful population. In fact, more than 50% of our country are below 35 years. And so our women groups are doing everything in our power to make sure this message goes across, especially to our rural communities who have been so disenfranchised by voting. They don't want to vote anymore because they don't see any difference in their lives. Their lives are, so what? If there's a president, so what? If there's a representative, so what? And so we're going out there now to do a lot of civic education so that our women know we do not want anybody to be left behind. For us, it's not a rhetoric anymore. It's reality of life.
Thank you. Right, so we'll move on to the SDGs. We're 9 months into them. And I'm wondering, Elise, for some people, they're quite vague and kind of lofty, and you know, we had them before. Did we achieve them? Did we not? How do you take something like gender equality, you know, number 5, and how does Vital Voices think about that? How do you bring that into your programming and your mission? Because, and what's success? What does it mean?
Yeah, well, first off, I mean, as you know, there's 17 goals, 169 targets, so it's really everything, right?
Yeah.
I think the good news is when it comes to women, it's more broad than what we were able to look at with the Millennium Development Goals. So it does take the next step, looking at women's political participation, further on the issue of economic development and entrepreneurship, and women getting involved in markets around the world. But honestly, I think from our perspective, you know, when I spend time, and I just actually came in this morning from the UN in New York, and when I spend time there, one of the things that's really heartening is that you hear many different leaders, government leaders, corporate leaders, talking about, well, if we don't achieve goal 5 to advance women and girls, the rest of the goals just aren't going to happen. And I'd agree with them. Certainly, it's great to hear them say that. But one of the major challenges that we have and that we continue to push on is that less than 7% of development dollars are spent on advancing women and girls. So if women and girls are the key, we got to put more resources there. So that's the first thing that I'd say, you know, that we're calling for and trying to get people to recognize. But then the other piece is that when world leaders come together and meet, you know, obviously by necessity, they're looking at these issues from that 30,000-foot vantage point, right? And what we know is that the women leaders that we work with, like Laura and Rosanna and the 15,000 women that we've worked with over the last 20 years in 140 countries around the world, they have boots on the ground. They're the ones who are every day working these issues. And I think, you know, you need both, right? You need that sort of heat at the top and heat at the bottom, and really to come together. And that's, I think, the role that we at Vital Voices play, really bringing women, obviously, to forums like this. Laura was with us at the UN this week. But really trying to raise these voices so that it's not just the leaders coming together, but you really have that authentic voice of what's really happening and how do you really move things forward.
A vital voice.
Yes.
Okay, good. So Laura, could you tell us a little bit about how governments, private sector, civil society, how they all work together to implement the SDGs in Argentina?
Well, I have to tell you something you haven't told. Now, I was appointed by the president as the head of the Anti-Corruption Office of Argentina. So after Congress, I moved into the executive. And I'm going to tell you what we are doing with goal number 16, if I'm not mistaken, related to the rule of law.
Just so for the audience, goal number 16 is rule of law?
Yeah, I think so. Okay. Justice and rule of law. Yes, I don't have it here, but I think, yes, it is. And, you know, I don't see.
Yeah, me neither. No idea.
Too far.
It's just a blur back there.
Yeah. I know that maybe they are not working properly.
I promise you they're there, and somebody can see it. But.
Definitely it's too far. So what government has done was to create this group of officials from different cabinet members and different offices, and we are working together, starting to set indicators to measure progress. So the first 6 months we have been discussing those indicators, but on the meantime, each of us are working on our specific agenda. So for me, it's goal number 16, or one part of goal number 16, which is the anti-corruption policies. So our policy has been to implement goal 17, which is building partnerships. Mm-hmm. So what I think, and we were discussing this yesterday at the CGI, the Clinton Global Initiative, with Alice and other people, is that what's really quite interesting in these new goals is the idea of partnership. Mm-hmm. Because in the Millennium Goals, it was like, okay, governments have to do this, 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 and governments are not enough. If you don't have private sector on board, if you don't have civil society organizations, the media, or I don't know, workers and employers, a lot of other people that are making decisions every day in different sectors, it's going to be quite difficult to achieve these goals. So I think that the most interesting part of course, the gender equality is very important and all the goals, it's number 17. So, okay, so how are we going to do this? And the only way to address this is sitting everyone around the table to make decisions. So this is a huge global and national effort to dialogue for policy and to build consensus. So for example, in the anti-corruption track, if I don't have the private sector, who are usually the ones that pay the bribes or the ones that offer the bribes, you know, it depends on which company are you talking to, it's going to be difficult. So of course I need to operate with my, bringing transparency and integrity into the public sector. But if I don't articulate and cooperate with the private sector and talk about this with the journalists and with the trade unions, and we start, building all together a common policy, but also specific policies for each of us, it's going to be quite difficult. So I think that, sometimes when you go and read these things, oh, this is obvious, but no one is going to happen. So, okay, maybe all of these things are obvious, but the most interesting thing for me, it's number 17, okay, how are we going to do this? And this other issue, things are global. And I think that what Alice has said, I was listening yesterday to some panels at the CGI about climate change. So I have listened to my president, for example, and other presidents talking about climate change and the commitments. So if climate change is a cross-sector global policy, why gender equality is not? Which is something that you are saying, because climate change is ruining not only businesses, but also the women and children's lives. So I think that we need to, be more emphatic with head of states and other people to tell them, okay, if you were able to sign these agreements in Paris about climate change, let's go for gender equality and gender inclusion, economic inclusion, educational inclusion, as a global policy cross sectors. And I want to see what they sign and who are going to sign. Well, because, it's difficult. It's still very tough. And when you are there in different, in the ground, in communities, or at the public sector, or as a politician, or as a woman in a company, it's very difficult. They come after you in a very harsh manner. What she said, they cannot accept a mistake on a female president. They accept all the mistakes in male presidents. But we cannot make mistakes. There is always a discriminatory way to see women in leadership. And sometimes, well, of course, the media is all the time, or most of the media, they really strengthen these stereotypes. Which is worse is when you listen to female journalists deepen the stereotypes against other women. So, we have taken a lot of exams. Men don't take exams. So let's all take exams if we want to be equal, at least when we have to make decisions. But for women, it's really very harsh. And I think that we need to address this because for us, and this is why, we are not weak. This is the other thing, because they think that we are weak because we are women. And we have to take so many exams throughout lives that we are the strongest persons on earth. So,
wow, there you go. Rosanna, would you give us the Liberian perspective on private enterprise, civil society, government working together on the SDGs?
Yeah, when our Minister of Gender and other partners came back after the launch of the SDGs, meeting was called to civil society, to our private sector, to the youth groups, to the media, to introduce the Sustainable Development Goals. And in Liberia, the women, we have a Women Umbrella Secretariat that's over women NGOs and women groups. And what we found is, in introducing something new, change does not really happen right away. Behavior change takes a long time. And though we have been, tugging away, fighting our cause, we have been having a lot of backlash. And sitting back to reflect on how can we make the message of gender equality, that is goal number 5. How can we empower women and girls when there is so much around them that keeps beating them down? One thing we realized was when the message of gender equality came in before the SDGs, it was the mindset of our society was gender means women. Okay, it's not the roles and responsibilities or the different groups. But as soon as you say gender, people say, oh, you women just go back. Oh, you women this. Oh, you girls this. But what we realized was we were not really having an equal input with how gender affects men and boys. Mm-hmm. It brings us back to us realizing that there's an increase of violence, whether it's domestic violence, sexual violence, economic, and we are saying, but why is this increase? Is it because we have more awareness going on? Or is it because our message was not clear, but our message was not inclusive? Women are not an island. Women and girls belong to a family, and that family in Africa is headed by men. For Liberia, we have the inheritance law that has been passed so that women are no longer the property of their husbands. Before, if a woman was dowried, where there's a bride price paid, she became the property of her husband. And so if that husband died, she, along with every other asset he has, is passed on to his family to divide. But with the inheritance law that has been passed, she is no longer his property. So she has the choice to go out and marry whomever she wants to. She has the choice to, own her own land because she has worked along with her husband to acquire that land. But still, that message is not accepted with our men. And so looking at goal number 5, gender equality means to us, those opportunities like equity, it should be there for her to have the choice to take or not. A girl going to school, she has to fight even harder. She needs protection from teachers, from other male students, all of that. So for Liberia, it has been, how can we make it culturally acceptable for our people so that we can get in line with the rest of the world when it comes to gender equality and empowerment?
Okay. I don't know if some of the audience saw the movie Pray the Devil Back to Hell about Lima Bowie, who won the Nobel Peace Prize. So you've got a history of some powerful women there in that part of Africa, so it's great. Elise, earlier you were talking about a megaphone, and Laura mentioned Twitter. I think, technology obviously plays a huge part in this, and I'd love to hear about how you see technology contributing overall to the women's movement, to the SDGs. What's your view on that?
Absolutely. I mean, you think about the power of the United Nations Fourth World Conference on Women back in 1995. One of the reasons it was so powerful, and you hear people talk about it, gathering 55,000 women from, some 189 countries, it was so powerful because back then we didn't have the internet. We didn't have a means to connect on a global level. These issues were not known. I mean, I remember going to that conference and learning for the very first time about human trafficking. And I saw a sign that said, "Stop human trafficking in women and girls." And I thought, what is that, a disease? This is only 1995, And it was really because we didn't have technology to share what was going on around the world for women and to recognize that that was happening in other places. And so I think it's been, at its core, a very valuable tool for information and access for women. But also when it comes to women-owned businesses, if a woman can't do business in her country because she's a woman, if she has access to technology, the world potentially is her market. So it certainly opens up a lot of opportunities for women. Obviously, there are a lot of pitfalls as well if you don't have access. And I think also violence and security is a major issue in terms of technology.
Okay. Laura?
Well, I think that let's see the positive side of technology, because all the gossiping in the social networks and social media is also quite complicated. But let's put our investments in the positive side to send the right messages. And I think that for development, you have from my point of view, I'm a policy person, so I'm all the time designing policy. And when I'm thinking from my point of view, I think that for development, of course, sustainable development, you need to have women on board. And technology and transparency are essential to improve women's lives. So, for example, when I have to analyze how do you register a new business in any country? So you can read the Doing Business or other, The Economist has some other analysis of where is it easier to register businesses or not. Any of them analyze this registering business from the gender perspective. And if you have openness and it's easier and you can register a business throughout your phone, it's going to be easier for whom? Probably for women that are producing things in rural areas or in cities, or they sell services, whatever, and they will be able to register easier. So I think that technology and transparency in policy, it's very important. It's very smart investment to advance women's rights and women's inclusion in economic development. Because many times women work a lot and they produce a lot. But in many countries, they do not exist for the governments. So men are taking the production, they take, they extract the production from the women, and they don't get anything. They don't get rights, they don't get services, they don't get any attention. So I think that technology is a great ally, and transparency and openness for women's development. It's crucial, and I hope that some governments start seeing this in this way, because we, in many countries, we vote, we pay taxes, we produce a lot, and we raise families, and we take care of the elder. We do everything, and we don't get the services that we deserve, and the attention and the recognition that we deserve. And we have to say this. And at some point, we have talked about this many times. The problem of agency, women, collective agency. We have a problem of agency. And I think that the Beijing conference has helped us to move on in these 20 years. But we need to connect more between this conversation is fantastic, and we promote with Vital Voices these conversations, and support women all the time. If you have to hire someone, put a woman first. I hire women. It's hard, to work with women, but but we're the best. So hire women, select women. I don't care what men say. I'm all the time recommending, if you hire a woman, you are going to make a great investment. And for sure, in a couple of years, she's going to take your position. So,
do you make her take all those tests that all the rest of us have to take if she works for you?
No. But really, and sometimes, do you know what happens? And we see this a lot. When you hire women and then they have this opportunity to have a position of leadership, usually what we say is, no, I'm not ready. I need to take more courses. I need to take more exams. No, look. If they offer you to run for president, say yes. Don't ask if you are able. You are able. And I think that this is something that we need to incorporate in our minds. we are able and capable to do whatever we want to do. So don't say, no, I'm not sure. When I was offered to run for Congress, do you remember? I was like, I told, at the Lincoln Center, I was like taking a shower and said, okay, yeah, should I do this or not? I took 2 days to think. Maybe I'm not well prepared. Okay, why not me? Okay, let's go there. And I think that's the question. Say yes. Say yes and set your goals, personal goals, very high. And if you set that goal very high, you are going to reach it. It will take you some time, but you will be there. But say, okay, this is I want to be here in 2 years, in 20 years. But this is something that we need also to incorporate and to spread within our female
Sisterhood.
colleagues. Yeah.
Sisterhood.
Yeah, how they say, in Africa, they talk about sisters all the time. We don't talk about sisters in Latin America, but it's, yeah. I like that concept.
And Rosanna, to you on technology and Liberia.
Well, we are very far behind. We are praying and hoping that we will have electricity to most parts of the country by December this year. But when it comes to technology, only a few have access to it. One thing that came into being on the line of technology that spread like wildfire is the cell phone. And the cell phone technology has really helped women to at least learn numbers, because you have to know the numbers to dial to call. And UN Women wants to bring in mobile money technology to get money to women, in rural parts. But the problem with that for us in Liberia, our mobile networks are not, spread across the country. So where we have women that we work with in rural communities, they walk for miles to have access, to catch a signal, or they climb a tree or go up a really tall hill, so we're still at that level. And what we suggested is that UN Women and even us as civil society engage our GSM companies to go, so that at least all of the counties have access at a more wider range. Because with that, then all of what Elise and Laura have said will be in the advantage of our women. They will be able to send and receive money. They will be able to, send their communications around. Even our children, we were able to get a hotline number from the telecommunications where they can report violence. They will be able to dial at the hotline for ambulances to come to them, and all of that. So for us, it's been a very hard struggle when it comes to technology. And I've been networking with groups here in the States to get computers. I say, why you guys maybe change your computers every 2 years or every year. When you guys are done, wipe it off and give it to us. We'll make use of them, so that our young people have access to do research for schoolwork, but also our women are able to communicate. A lot of our cross-border trade women, they go across borders between, our countries in West Africa and take goods and bring in goods. So with technology, they are able to reach out to other businesses outside of the country and to attract business.
Oh, so there's lots of opportunity there still.
Yeah.
Okay, so one last brief one from me before we go out to the audience. It's September 2030, and there's an XDG. We don't know what it is, SDG, MDG. What do you think, what does it look like? Is it going to be number 5? I know they're not ranked. I don't think they're ranked in order.
No,
Yeah. It's not the 5th most important thing on the agenda, right? But so what does it look like? What do you think we're going to be focusing on? And do you think progress, we're marching forward, but what do you see happening over the next 14, 15 years?
Well, I certainly hope we see progress. One of the things that Laura said earlier with this idea of partnership, I think we need to think about partnership really broadly and hopefully quite disruptively as well. I've been in this space of advancing women for 20 years, and although we've seen progress, it's also at the same time frustrating because we're not moving far enough. And I often think we're sort of applying the same tactics to solve these old intractable problems, or seemingly intractable problems. So one of the things I think as we think about our next 15, 20 years of Vital Voices is sort of trying those out-of-the-box things we've never tried before. One of the things that we've been talking about doing is really looking at how we can use culture and the arts to open people's minds in a different way and shift culture, because we know that culture and behavioral change is one of the major things holding women back around the world. We also are really interested in how do we better engage men. And it's not just saying, oh, come on, men, be part of this. It's really making a space for them. One of the women leaders that we work with in Pakistan does some incredible work in the media and making these films. And what she does is she puts men who are heroes, who have stopped crimes against their daughters and stood up for their daughters. And she really shows them as the heroes in the films. And what she says is that there is this silent majority out there in the world. And the silent majority is men and boys, and I know there's a lot of men and boys here today, who believe that violence against women is wrong, who believe that women and girls deserve the same rights and opportunities, shouldn't be fearful to be in their homes or on the streets because of violence affecting 1 in 3 women and girls in their lifetime. They believe that this shouldn't be the case, and they don't do anything about it because we don't give them the opportunity to. We don't invite them into the space and say, these aren't women's issues, this is humanity's issues, these are economic issues. So I think that a big stride forward, hopefully in the next 15 to 20 years, would be that we all think more disruptively about how to solve these difficult problems. And we invite more people into the space, both across sectors, but also think about who's not at the table, whose voice isn't being heard, and how do we bring them to the table to solve these issues. And hopefully they're going to have some new ideas about how to do it as well.
Great, so disrupt and include. That's the message. Laura.
I could have just said that.
Oh, it's perfect. It's nice to get it down to 2 words. What do you think, 2030? Give us the picture.
Well, I'm an optimist because I think that, of course, we have a lot of problems. The world has a lot of new challenges, but we also live better than 400 years ago or 300 years ago or even 20 years ago. So we have found a way to move on. And, talking about these goals, takes my mind to the Second World War and the Human Rights Convention and all the work of Eleanor Roosevelt to create that Declaration of Human Rights. And in a way, the world has become more peaceful. We think that we are not there, but compared to the past, we are more peaceful. We have new challenges, of course, but we always move. And I think that this is something, because if not, we always tend to be negative or pessimist. And I think that when you see what happened in the past 100 years for women, we are moving. And of course, the world is very diverse and there are terrible problems everywhere, even in this country, with racial problems, which is crazy, and these problems are still there. But now we can deal with them. Everybody can see what's going on. We can see what's correct and what's not correct. So I think that we are moving, and I think that we will be better in 2030, and that women will be will be a complete part of development. So one of the big I think if I have to bet in one of the 17 ones, put a bet, gender equality is going to be one of the winners.
That's a very optimistic one.
Yeah. Yes, because I'm confident of women moving this goal. If I work with the rule of law thing and corruption, and you have to deal with the judges, you have to deal with the presidents, you have to the laws and the Congresses. That's too difficult. But in gender equality, you have a great asset, women. So if women move the agenda, women vote. in democracies, we vote, we have to demand. We pay taxes. We have to demand the services, the infrastructure, what we need. And I think that we need to carry this message. So that's why my bet is on number 5. Is that I don't have very good.
Like a horse race,
I
it's
bet
number
on number
5. I'm not sure where there are bookies taking bets on the Sustainable Development Goals, but we'll find that out. Rosanna.
Yes, I am also optimistic that in 30 years, for me, number 1, which is to end poverty, and 3, to end hunger, will be possible because number 5 is working really hard in ensuring that women find their voices, as you're saying, to demand what is theirs and to take that position, what is theirs. I work with a lot of rural people, and though I work in the urban city of Monrovia, we reach out to communities, and people do not realize, women and girls do not realize the power they have. And we were having a conversation last week, and I said, do you guys know, because this whole corruption thing has been in our headlines where the Speaker of our House was accused of something very shady, and the other members of Parliament in the representatives asked him to recuse himself from, leading the sessions, and he refused. And so all of the decisions have been held back because he refused. So I told the ladies, I said, do you know that we are all hostages right now because one man doesn't want to do what he's supposed to do? And they said, really? I said, yes. I said, you know what? If I was from his county, from his district that voted him, I would take signatures from 5,000 and say, look, get out. We don't want you anymore. A vote of no confidence. But our people don't know that. All they feel is we have to put a leader there. But if that leader does not perform, we still have that right to remove you in our Constitution. And so I feel that our work is to let people know what their responsibilities are as long as, as well as their rights are. And we are going to move ahead. And it's going to be up to us. Number 5.
Okay,
Yeah.
number 5. Right, you heard it, ladies and gentlemen. We have exactly 14 minutes left for questions from the audience. If you have a question, please raise your arm and there'll be a mic. Why don't we kick it off with Adele Simmons, board member of the council.
Thank you all very, very much. I have a question really about the Liberian situation. How does Ellen feel when she's with all the other male African presidents? Within the context of African leadership, does she have an issue or a problem?
Okay, from what I have been able, it's my opinion, not hers, but she has won her space. And I say that right now, she is the chairperson for the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. And it was done so beautifully that because of her age and her experience, they look up to her. She was the only female in the expert panel for the MDGs. And we had a big meeting in Monrovia coming towards the end of the Millennium Development Goals. And she has been able to, listen to what people say. And sometimes people feel that she's strong-willed on her own. But sometimes you have to be when you are female. And I think that has been, where she is now. Among the men, she is the only elected female. Malawi had a vice president that became president because of the death of the president, right? But she was elected twice. And so that's a strength she has.
Thanks. Jane Madden, please, right here. Other side.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Jane Madden, Managing Director, U.S. Corporate Responsibility for Burson Marsteller. So my question is about corporate partnerships and the role of the private sector in SDGs. I work with Fortune 500 companies where the SDGs is the new buzzword. even more vagueness. Not everybody's quite sure what they mean. So I guess I have two questions to you. One, how do we move from conversation and policy to corporate action? And then once we do that, how do we measure corporate input, which are into what are basically national goals? Because I see a lot of my clients really struggling with that, if they even get to that level. So how do we work with those, and how do we actually get better information to corporations about the SDGs and what the role of the private sector should be, rather than what they hope it is?
Elise, you want to have it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say they're not going to be achievable without the private sector. And that's a fact. I mean, it's now been documented. There just isn't enough development resources out there. So private sector is absolutely critical, but I agree with you. It's so broad and vague. You know, how do we begin to... And one of the things that we did, and if anyone here is interested in being part of this, we'd be happy to tell you more. And my colleague Jenny Smith is here, and she's been leading this effort at Vital Voices. So what we've been doing is, over the last year, really pulling together partners across sectors who want to jumpstart the SDG 5, but also the other women-related targets within the SDGs. But what we did is we said, we're not going to take on everything. We're going to look at where are the greatest gender gaps that exist. So we looked at political participation, because women are only about 22% of parliaments globally, but looking more broadly at political participation and how could we move the needle there. We also looked at women's entrepreneurship and economic development, how women are this incredible resources entrepreneurs, but they're not able to access global markets, opportunities to trade their goods and services. They're only like 1% of the global supply chain to major multinational corporations, as you probably know. And then we finally looked at violence against women. As I said before, this is one of the great pieces of unfinished business. So those are where the greatest gender gaps exist. We're closing the gap when it comes to girls' education, healthcare, things are getting better. So we wanted to focus on these three. And then we came up with some very specific things that corporations could do, that NGOs could do. And when we calculated everything up, Jenny, what was it, $70 million affecting close to about 1 million lives. And quite frankly, I am not someone who likes big numbers, because I really believe in impact. And you know, I think one of the things that the private sector has to be careful about is not trying to sort of take that same ROI that we're used to in the private sector and apply it to social change, right? Because social change takes time. I mean, it does take 15 years. But really, I think we are hoping to, with this coalition, or we're calling it sort of a community of practice, is to not say we all have to work together. I mean, we've got P&G as part of this commitment, and we've also got Unilever, two major competitors. But we've come together to say we're each going to take a piece of this. So by the end of, you know, we're meeting on a regular basis, and we have calls and really look at how far we've come. But at the end of this, we can really look at what were we able to achieve. And we also have a goal of $15 billion of spend on women-owned businesses. So many of these corporations saying, we're going to look at our supply chain. We're going to first figure out how many women-owned businesses are we buying from. And then we're going to look at how do we double that or triple that? What kind of goals can we create? So we've got a goal there of spend. But that's one of the ways that I think nonprofits like mine, Vital Voices, or others can be really helpful to the private sector, is kind of, you know, walking you through, here's where you can have impact. Because you're right, I mean, if we try and do everything, it's like boiling the ocean. It's not going to happen even in 15 years. But if we can get specific and hopefully jumpstart some of these issues, we can see some progress, hopefully.
Thank you.
I think so also that if I were in a company and you know, reputation is very important, I would say that it's smart to have women in decision-making positions, and I would say we pay equally. And this is something that needs to be addressed as well, because women are not usually paid equally for the same job. And the other thing, because I see this more and more in these countries, more developed countries, is that many women quit their careers because of family. So if countries like this do not address the conciliation policy between work and life, and we don't address altogether that raising a family is, you know, both side decision, or if there is one person, one head of the family, it's that responsibility. But if you have two persons in a house, both of them have a responsibility, and I think that policy has to be adjusted, but also corporations can do a lot. So if you say our corporate social responsibility things and the way we take care of the environment, okay, the way we are taking care of our families, one way is paying equally women and men, the other way is giving women some possibilities to raise their families, and these things I think are important. They matter a lot. And they will get more productivity, because if you have happy employers, you get more profits, for sure.
Great. How about a question from, do we have one of the students in the room have a question? Wonderful, right there, please, the young lady in the black dress.
Hello, my name's Annabelle, and I'm from Whitney Young High School. And I had a question specifically about the gender issues in Latin America, so for Laura. I know that on social media, a campaign against femicides has recently gotten to popularity. It's called Ni Una Menos. Sí.
Yeah, that was the campaign I was talking about.
Right, so I was wondering, I know it's been very popular in Peru and perhaps also Argentina, and I was wondering if it has truly gained support of government, or it has just been increasingly taboo.
In Argentina, where this was invented after a tweet of a journalist, like the Ni Una Menos, not one less, after a femicide, the coalition of women that started the movement created an agenda that was published, and they discussed with the government and with Congress. So I think that some efforts are being made around that. Yes.
Pearl Jam. Remember Pearl Jam came to Argentina?
He came?
Remember
sorry.
that?
Eddie Vedder? No.
Yeah, the concert. Remember? I connected you. Anyway.
Oh, yes, you connected me. You're right. Oh,
I know
so
they were trying to be very outspoken on the issue.
Yes. So that's a very interesting case. But I have to check what's going on with the agenda. But for example, the new president appointed as the head of the Women's Policy Agency a woman that has worked for many, many years against violence. And she's very smart and recognized publicly for her work. So I think that this is moving. And everything started with a tweet. Yeah. This journalist saying, what are we going to do? Wait till they kill us. And this started, and it's massive. And it has expanded to other countries in Latin America, yeah.
So we have some young men over here. Can we demystify anything for you? No?
Yes, there is one there.
Where? I can't. Oh, lovely. Two. Yes, perfect. The mic's behind you. We'd love to hear from you.
Jay Marneza. I got questions. Since you are world leaders, and I know this is a political question, and the election is coming up, do you believe if Hillary Clinton was elected, would she be inspiration to girls all around the world, mainly America? And would you believe that she would be a sustainable first female president?
I think I'll throw that one over to Elise, since she's worked for Hillary Clinton. She may have some views on that.
Yeah. Well, I've worked with her and traveled with her. She's one of the founders of Vital Voices, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for her as a leader. I don't know if you know this, and I feel like it should be a story that's told to a lot of young people. When she was First Lady, she decided she was going to go and give that famous speech in Beijing, China at the UN Fourth World Conference on Women, and no one wanted her to go. But people in her husband's administration did not want her to go. People who were working at the White House for her husband said, no, you shouldn't go. People in Congress said, no, you shouldn't go, on both sides of the aisle. Journalists talked about it, no, you shouldn't go. It's not your place as the First Lady to talk about policy issues. She went anyway. And it was a huge risk, but she went because she knew, if I go, the media will cover it, and these issues that no one knows about, which was very true, will get to the world stage. Because, of course, this is, really before the internet took root. I know it's hard to imagine. There was definitely no social media, no Twitter, nothing like that, no Google, nothing, So this was really the only way to get the message out, and she did that. And I think you know, I wish more young people knew that about her, because I think we can all respect those leaders who authentically follow their heart, right? And their gut, and sort of know what's right and go out and do it, no matter if it's popular or not popular. Now, in the end, it ended up being the speech of her life, and it's a historic moment. Do I think young people around the world, do I think these women, you know, everywhere I go, women around the world say, you know, give her my best, what can I do? I wish I could vote, you know. So, you know, she has a lot of friends and fans around the world, and I think, you know, I think she would do a phenomenal job. I'll say Vital Voices is bipartisan, nonpartisan, and we really do work across the party lines. But at the same time, you know, as someone who's dedicated her life to women's leadership, I think it would be phenomenal for women in this country and, quite frankly, around the world. But I think it would be great for men, too.
Anything to add?
I'm Hillary partisan.
Oh, okay.
So it's
And you are definitely transparent, so that's good.
and this is not a, you know, this is not an official response. It's very personal. I met her through Vital Voices. I've talked to her many times. I think she's very well prepared. She's a very strong and sensitive person at the same time. And I think that she understands, and she represents the women, the style of women leading, which is a more horizontal, egalitarian, emotional way of leading. And that's why I think she's the best choice. Sorry for the other guy.
That's okay. I read the disclaimer for the organization at the beginning, so we're all good.
No, that goes on me.
Yeah, and from Liberia, we have given the example of 2 terms of a female president, and we stand behind her. I work with girls and women, and they said, you know, if we could vote, we would vote her in. Because people were surprised that America, being a world leader, did not, you know, have a female president, you know, and we are rooting for her.
The other thing that I think you bring up that is an important point is that every time a woman takes a step to be a first, she's got to be really, really
Very good.
And
Yeah.
she has that weight on her shoulders because she knows if I don't do a good job, it's going to be, you know, who knows how many more years before another woman gets elected. So, you know, I think that there's not a huge sea of women who've risen to this level, sadly, in this country, who we could see as one day electing, and I think she's one of the few. And I think that that she would be phenomenal, and I think would pave the way for other women leaders to come.
Terrific. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have time for. Please join me in thanking our fabulous panelists today. Thank you. Thank you again to our sponsors, Horizon Pharma, Abbott, USG, Ashley and Avery McCall, Holthouse, and Frankel Family Foundation. See you soon at the next one. We've got other great stuff. Thanks again. Have a nice afternoon.